Tonight is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. It's the Fantasy Finish Line podcast, Week 10's playoff push.
Little guy? Thank you. Excellent.
All right.
Well-
So it is the Fantasy Finish Line podcast.
Welcome to the show.
I am Jason, joined as always by Dave. I like how you start the music and you're like, oh, I must be in charge of opening the show now.
Well, this is a from a company that we run called drinkfive. So we'd be remiss not to join you and regale you with a couple of cocktails among all the fantasy talk. So I'm just
course.
popping that off. I'm getting that started.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Mm.
It's a good way to start the show.
Mm-hmm.
Woo.
Get you in the mood to talk about fantasy, right?
There's some goosebumps there. Got the high def going. See the goosebumps? So, I am Jason, joined as always by Dave. Dave, say hi to the good folks. Let them know what you're drinking.
Hello, friends. I am drinking hazed juice from Brickstone Brewery. And for those of you listening on the podcast and different kinds of channels that we have out there, like Spotify or Stitcher, and you can't see, that's too bad. I do encourage you to check out one of our YouTube shows occasionally, which is the same content, but you'll actually be able to see what we're drinking, see if Jason's scowling at me because of what I said about a player. But this is a hazy India Pale Ale from Brickstone Brewery from Bourbonnais. And I have not had a sip of it yet, but I have had it before, and I really like the drink.
Oh, it's good. Here's your glass.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, tonight we're going to kind of get you ready for the playoff push. It is week 10 in the NFL, so it's rivalry week if you're into that sort of thing. And
well, let me ask a question.
Please.
He's a commissioner Jason is a commissioner for a lot of leagues that we're in, past, present, and future, I think. And
don't commit me to anything that I'm not ready for.
We should just have a podcast about whether or not Jason will still remain the commissioner of fantasy leagues going forward. We can have people call in and be like, "Would you like this league? It's yours."
You can have it sleep, please.
No, but it's a pain in the ass to run these leagues, and I was just gonna ask for rivalry, and I can't say it. No one can say it.
No
correctly.
one can say it.
But rivalry week is where you have set matchups for people that are always at odds with each other, or maybe are old friends or enemies or whatever. Yeah. And my question was, for that, is that something that you got from somewhere else or someone else, or is that something that you started? So is week 10 significant? Like, what's the deal?
So when I started running leagues, Yahoo would just call it rivalry week in week 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at it and I started picking rivals, and I just kind of carried that on. In one of our 12-team leagues, instead of doing that, what we did is, to make the schedule even out, we just picked 2 rivals for every team, and you play those teams twice, you play everybody else once. So I like it as sort of a little feature of the schedule, but there isn't a whole lot that's necessarily special about it, aside from the fact that you and I are always going to play each other in week 10 in several leagues.
Yeah, right.
anything that we're not in the same division, we're going to play each other that week and that week only. So I believe we play each other 3 times this week. Good luck with that.
Well, cheers to that. Good luck to you too. And never fails. One of the great things about this week, Rivalry Week, I can't say it still, Rivalry Week, is that it takes place in week 10. Although there's some leagues where there's multiple weeks that you do that, right?
Sure. I mean, you can just... It's whatever you want it to be. You just declare it rivalry week.
You play your rival every single week. That's how it works. No.
Yes, your rival, the person you play each week should be your arch rival for that week.
But because it's week 10, it ends up being a pretty hard week because there's all these injuries and this season, of course, COVID. So we've got these decimated rosters and people that we're not sure if they're going to play, and if they play, are they going to be healthy? Are they going to be just used as distractions? So it adds that extra element. I was wondering where you got that week 10 thing from, because I kind of like it. I dig the week 10 placement.
But that was Yahoo as well. That was the week that they picked, and you could always reassign the week in Yahoo. But I liked week 10 for a lot of those same reasons. You get a lot of just randomness. Like let's take a look at our matchup in the Drink 5 League. You are going to be, hopefully, rolling with Nick Chubb, who's coming off of injury.
Hopefully.
You've got Tom Brady, who's coming off of perhaps the worst game of his entire career.
His angry Tom Brady is probably a good one. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on bye, I'm missing my 2 Chiefs and one of my best wide receivers, Calvin Ridley.
Oh, thank God the Chiefs
well.
are not in the equation. I'm doing well on this one.
So I'm gonna have to roll with Devin Singletary this week. Hopefully, maybe I'll get Mike Davis in there instead. I don't know. We'll see.
But I'm quite sure, on the other side of the coin, you've got other leagues, right, where I'm playing you because we are rivals in multiple leagues, and you have the advantage because I know on one of them, for example, I have one good running back in James Conner, but the other guy, David Johnson, might not play. The backups that I have for that position are also out, so I might end up playing Kalen Ballage or Nyheim Hines or...
Yeah, well, in this league, you have the decided advantage. It's a 2-quarterback league. It's a dynasty league, so please don't get too on me with my terrible team. But you have Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray.
And Deshaun Watson. How do I pick between those guys, man?
And I have Teddy Bridgewater and Joe Burrow.
There is a difference here, right? But you are a team that is rebuilding.
I'm in the rebuilding phase, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
So, this is fun. In our one other Carthago Delenda Est versus Mysterion, this is probably going to be our most even matchup.
A good match?
Yeah, I think so.
That's
Although
fun.
you are favored. Because I'm starting Alex Smith and Russell Wilson.
Oh, good.
And you have Kyler Murray again.
I want to
Drew
play.
Brees.
I want to play anyone who's starting Alex Smith against me.
Well, hopefully I'll be starting Ben Roethlisberger. We'll see what happens.
We're all glad he's playing football again, except for people that have to start him in fantasy football.
Oh boy, yeah. I'm not looking forward to starting Alex Smith, but he'll probably be better in the flex than a T. Higgins or Mr. Henderson on the Rams. So anyways, let's dive into what we want to talk about this week, which are player trends. We talk about player trends all the time. We like to look at guys who are moving up 3 weeks in a row, moving down 3 weeks in a row, perhaps more, perhaps nearly a clean move up and down.
Yep.
So the first guy I was looking at was Curtis Samuel. He is wide receiver for Carolina. Week 7 at New Orleans, he put up 14.3. Week 8 versus Atlanta, he put up 19.4. And Week 9 in Kansas City, 22.3 just last week. So he's actually trending up over 5 games, not just 3. This goes all the way back to the beginning of Week 4. He started the season very slowly. He only passed the 4-target mark once in the first 4 weeks. And now over the last 3 games, he has 7 carries and 20 targets overall. So that's some great usage numbers. He scored at least 1 touchdown per game during this stretch. He broke the 100-yard mark last week. He is definitely got a lot of positive things going in his direction. Now, he's not the most targeted player on his team. Not even close. I don't even think he's been the second targeted player in any of these last 3 weeks on his team. But he's a dynamic player. The team wants to get the ball into his hands. He is averaging 7.5 touches per game because he carries the ball a lot. He has at least 1 carry in every game and more than 1 in all but 2 games. So he's only owned in 69% of leagues right now in Flea Flicker. So it's possible he's available in maybe not yours or my league, but someone's league out there. And 31% of them, in fact,
right.
He is available. So he is an important member of this offense. And he has some good matchups coming up, especially against Minnesota and against Denver. I view Curtis Samuel as an above-average bye-week or injury replacement. Would you rank him higher than that, Dave? Or do you think I have him pegged properly?
I'm not looking at his specific stats over the last couple of games, and I can pull those up real quickly here. I'm not prepared for your level of question, but I will pull it up. It'll just take me a moment.
Did I ask you the question? You're like, don't ask me this.
Well, no, I want to be able to look at how he's done over a period of time.
It's the fantasy points are trending up. The usage is a bit variable.
Yeah.
Really.
So what I was gonna say is, it looked to me, and it doesn't appear to look that way on the actual scorecard here on the fantasy points sheet, because you're actually seeing a trend up for Curtis Samuel from week 2, which is fun. 4, 7, 6, 8, 14, 19, 22.
Yeah.
So it's just straight up the board. But when I saw him and when I watched those games, I feel like I'm seeing Curtis Samuel games where he is scoring 2 touchdowns or getting a lot of plays real quickly together. But what I realize after looking at this,
that's what I saw last week for sure. He'll get 4 touches on a drive.
when I'm looking at this sheet now of all the games laid out, what I'm seeing is that he just sort of blasted off over the last 3 weeks when he really wasn't doing much at all for the beginning of the season. Now, I would have known this, but I don't actually own Samuel anywhere, so I've been a little bit farther from him. But I know Jessica, for example, my fiance has
Jessica, who joined us on the show last week.
Right. She has Samuel on a team. In fact, one of the times when she was playing me, and of course that's one of the weeks that Samuel
he
scored.
puts up 2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns. So I think, especially with Christian McCaffrey not playing again, and we're going to have Teddy Bridgewater likely trying to come back from behind, having some difficult circumstances, other receivers and positions guarded closely. Samuel seems to be that guy that they go for to get those big plays. So I think he's a little more than that bye-week replacement flex kind of guy.
Okay.
I think that he, sitting at these points at 14, 19, 22, consistent 3-week trend, should probably be started as a wide receiver 2 in most leagues.
Interesting. So he's not leading the team in targets at all, not even close. That usually goes to Robbie Anderson or whoever is playing running back. Like Christian McCaffrey had 10 targets last week. And DJ Moore is probably a guy who is going to average a little bit more than him. What I wonder with Samuel is, since they're giving him carries and bursts, if they find matchups on the field and try to just exploit the matchup.
I think so. When you look at guys like DJ Moore, I mean, you're right that he's getting more targets than Samuel is, but he's only done something with them twice this year or something like that. So we know that Curtis Samuel is one of those guys that's like, what's his name? The character that was a running back, Antone Smith.
Oh, nobody can touch Antone Smith. Come on.
When we look at points per touch, we would see Curtis Samuel doing much better at that points per touch stat than most of the fantasy people we have in our teams. So you're right. It's going to be unpredictable, but you have a trend right in front of you. It'd be difficult not to play him on your team this week. If you had him on your team, would you be able to sit him on the bench?
That's a tough call. So do you think his targets are going to increase as the season goes on?
No.
Or do you think he's going to stick towards the 7.5 or so touches per game?
Yeah, he seems to just have this limited usage and opportunities with design plays for Samuel, which how great is that to be a player where they design things for you?
Then I think that this is a lot of lucky matchups with Curtis Samuel, and I don't know that this is going to be sustained.
I'm not sure I can see 3 weeks of a continuing trend as luck, but we'll have to see. I'm not arguing with you, by the way. I find it impossible in most cases to not start a guy who has had 3 weeks of increasing fantasy points.
Sure, and the reason we bring it up is because, at this point, I don't know that Curtis Samuel was for sure an every week starter. You would have said that about him going into last week, but now is definitely the time to ask yourself this question. Should we be putting him in all the time or not? Or I think for me personally, I'm going to leave him as a bye week replacement, injury replacement kind of guy. I don't think he bumps anybody off of my starting list on any of my teams.
Oh man, well, it's just that thing where if you look and see that there's a guy who's scoring at least 15 points a game and is trending up, and you're not playing him, how many weeks do we have left? You're losing time on this. You know what
true.
I mean?
It's a tough call.
If he goes up again and you play some guy who has 4 points, you're gonna kick yourself pretty hard.
Absolutely. Well, I don't have him on my team anywhere, so
well, that's why we can have this.
We'll make this hypothetical.
Neither of us have Curtis Samuel across our 14 leagues.
Yeah,
somehow.
There's 100 fantasy players between us. None of them named Curtis Samuel.
We've clearly made a mistake not owning Curtis Samuel, owning him the last 3 weeks. That's something we can agree
of our whole list. Spoiler alert, I only have 2 of them on any of my teams.
Well, it's not like...
And only 1 of each.
We're not going to talk about a bunch of guys that everyone has and everybody plays every week. Who's trending up? Kyler Murray.
Dalvin Cook, trending up. Should we start him?
Murray, Rodgers, Cook. Are you interested in playing these guys? What do you think?
Do you think I should start Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray?
I think it's a toss-up there. All right, well, let's get into Drew Lock. And Drew Lock, of course, quarterback for Denver. His ECR from Fantasy Pros is 19, so that's a borderline quarterback 2 or 3. His getting his first starts this year. I think it was week 6 when he came in for the first time to start a game. And I've got all the stats here, which I'll put.
Was he injured to begin the year then? I
Drew,
thought he played a couple games and then he got injured.
I don't recall.
Drew Lock started weeks 1 and 2.
Okay.
And in week 2, he only had 5 pass attempts.
Well, let's. Thanks for the correction. So week 6 is when he started his longer streak of consistent playing.
Yeah.
And he was 10 for 24, 189 yards, 2 interceptions, 5 attempts at rushing, resulting in -1 yard, for 5.46 fantasy points. So I doubt that.
Oh boy!
I doubt people were out there starting Drew Lock in his first time back from injury, one of his first starts of the year. But what was really good to see, and I think people were very enthusiastic about, was that in week 7 he had 14.96 points, but he had a rushing touch. He didn't have any passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Mm-hmm. So still kind of doing poorly. He had over 40 passing attempts, and week 8. Versus the Chargers, 26 for 41. So again, over 40, 248 yards, three passing touchdowns. That's when he kind of broke out this week, and 20.82 fantasy points. And then week 9, just last week versus the Falcons, who everybody loves to play against as a quarterback. 313 yards on 48 attempts. Only 25 of those completed, so pretty poor. I didn't see the game specifically.
Yeah, it's not a great percentage.
But 2 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, and he finally got his feet on the ground, 7 rushing attempts for 47 yards. That's 30.22 fantasy points. So he went from 5 to 14 to 20 to 30. So very much, continuing in that great direction. Now, the majority of the fantasy production from the past 2 games has come in the second half. So for Drew Lock and the Broncos, and I know that we're going to talk about another Bronco in a little bit, so you've done some research on them in the past couple days here. Why do you think that it's the second half where they're getting all those points from the quarterback position?
I think that teams are starting fast against them, and that's what's happening to the Broncos. They don't have a great run offense, so they're unable to sort of dominate in the first half at all. Mm-hmm. And teams are getting up on them. The Chiefs, the Chargers, and Atlanta all got early leads on them, and it caused them to have to come back in the game. And that means that it's going to be Drew Lock throwing the ball a lot in order to try to keep up, in order to catch up. They're playing Las Vegas. They're playing Nevada. They're playing Las Vegas, Miami, New Orleans, all these teams, and then Kansas City again. All these teams are going to be able to get a lead on them in the first half. So if you're a betting person, then you may want to bet the first half on the opponent of the Broncos for now. But always count on the Broncos making the game interesting for the most part. Obviously, against Kansas City, they were left in the dust and couldn't keep up at all. But they beat New England a few weeks ago, and they beat the Chargers in a very impressive last-minute drive, last-minute touchdown.
Right, so it's not all garbage points; it's actual comebacks. And
they're garbage points until you win the game.
Well, no, they're garbage points if you're Blake Bortles or if you're
Cecil Shorts.
Yeah, if you're Gardner Minshew to a degree. I'm sorry, it's too soon to talk about the Minshew.
Oh.
Minshew mania ended in a sudden bolt.
Now it's Luton lunacy.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, going up against the Raiders defense in Week 10, so that's another favorable matchup. And the Raiders are giving up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks at 21.5 per game. Locke has a whole bunch of playmakers on the team. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk about Jerry Jeudy a little bit later. In fact, right after this, Jason's going to break into Jeudy. Locke has attempted 40 or more passes, like I mentioned earlier, 3 games in a row, and so could be considered a borderline quarterback 1 in this matchup against the porous Raiders. I love that this guy who's throwing 40 or more passes in every game, that has trended up for 4 games in a row, that has a lot of playmakers, going up against the team with the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, is in the position that he's in. And I would start Drew Lock in this position over a lot of starting quarterbacks that I see people have on their team.
Would you start him over Derek Carr?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
So what do you think about Lock's chances of finishing in the top 10 for quarterback fantasy points this week?
This week, I like it. I think that just like in the past weeks, they're going to get behind in the first half. Oakland does have a strong run game with Josh Jacobs. They have a strong possession game with Darren Waller. One of the guys who I was looking at for the downward trend, so I didn't end up going with, is Henry Ruggs. And Ruggs is barely being targeted. And I noticed that nobody is being targeted on that team to the tune of more than 4 targets a game, aside from Darren Waller.
Yeah. And Ruggs, I mean, he's on my cut list, and he was probably on the cut list earlier this season. So probably the reason we're not doing a trend on him is he's not relevant.
Exactly. There's not, there's no real reason to talk about him. But in my brief, foray into what the Raiders are doing right now, I like what they are doing with the offense that is doing well. Jacobs and Waller are playing very well right now. They're producing at a very high level.
Okay.
And, Waller should enjoy being the number 1 tight end this week because it's not going to happen when Travis Kelce plays football again.
Well, I'll let him know.
In week 11.
I'll send him a tweet and tell him it's from you.
Yes.
So wrapping up, Locke has matchups against the Dolphins, the Saints, the Chiefs, and the Panthers coming up in the next 4 games. All of those are much tougher opponents to quarterbacks. As of Week 9, they're ranked 19th, 13th, 25th, and 24th, respectively, for fantasy points against quarterbacks. What I mean, I don't want to confuse that, is that they are giving up the least amount of points, not the other way around. Then the Chargers, Falcons, and Raiders that we talked about earlier, the 4th, 2nd, and 7th most points that they're giving up, like you mentioned when we talked about all those weeks. So that defensive reprieve he's been able to enjoy, it's like the feeling I'm going to compare it to when you're on a tropical vacation, say you're in Hawaii, but you have to return home to Chicago in January the following week. So,
yes, I've been there.
Yeah, so have I. So enjoy it while it lasts. And my prediction is that Drew finishes top 10 in Week 10, but then he should be left out on the waiver wire afterwards for the duration of the season. So it's going to be a great week for Drew. Then he needs to bundle up and go home.
Yeah, fair enough. So we're going to talk about Jerry Jeudy in just a second. I just want to remind everybody, if you're watching on YouTube or even if you're not, go to YouTube, subscribe to our channel so that you can know when we're going live every week so that you can get in the chat room and talk to us live because we love to answer your lineup questions. We just got one in here. Let's see. What does your gut think we should do with the Colts backfield for the rest of the season? I would like to bring them out back and shoot them all.
Oh,
is that acceptable?
That's pretty intense.
Okay, then we'll just skip that. Perhaps I drafted Jonathan Taylor a little too much, and it's driving me insane. What do we do with Jonathan Taylor? I think you have to roll with him. I don't know. You can't trade him. Benching him feels like the wrong thing to do. He did finally score a touchdown last week. If you have clearly better options, obviously, Jonathan Taylor's probably not in your lineup right now. Aside from that, I think that Jonathan Taylor probably should stay in the lineup because that is a good enough offense that you need the primary running back in if you have him.
Well, I have to disagree with you in the fact that I don't think that Taylor is the primary running back any longer. In fact, Jordan Wilkins has gotten more carries than Jonathan Taylor has for the past 2 weeks in a row. So I don't want to rain on your Taylor parade. But
no, that's fine. I need to be spoken. I need reason spoken.
Well, look,
to me.
He's a rookie, right? And for all rookies, we always preach to temper expectations. But here's a guy that everyone was drafting really early, and so you expect him to perform well on your team. In redraft, that's just a mistake. Now, we're in some dynasty leagues and deep leagues in which it makes a lot of sense to grab a hold of these guys or keeper leagues or whatever. But in a redraft league, to grab Jonathan Taylor as someone to be an every week starter, you have to remember that they were originally planning on having Marlon Mack be the starter with Taylor kind of just learning from Mack. And when everything occurred there...
yeah, that's true. Mack isn't around for him to learn anymore.
When everything occurred there, it kind of thrust him into a role that perhaps he wasn't completely ready for. And so now we're seeing guys like Jordan Wilkins, who have been on the teams as long as Hines has. They were drafted the same year. Okay. Those guys are more trusted by the organization than Taylor. And Taylor got a touchdown that saved his day last week, but he also got a fumble and looked pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean,
so
he scored 10 points and scored a touchdown.
I'm personally
or
not
8 points. Ugh.
I'm personally not starting Taylor at all whatsoever, but I don't mind holding him on a team as long as there's a deep enough roster that it's not ruining your chances at
So they play Tennessee tomorrow night. Tennessee is giving up 15 points to opposing running backs per game.
Look, it's a split between Hines.
Green Bay is a good matchup. Then they play Tennessee again. Houston, it's like they have nothing but like green matchups. Like it's.
But you're looking at
tough.
a team where there's 3 running backs, and Jonathan Taylor is not even getting that gold star as like.
Okay, so I have to ask you for a spoiler. Did Taylor make your cut list yet?
No.
Okay.
So I'm holding Taylor. I'm
So
not.
for now, we hold on the bench.
I'm not playing Wilkins. I'm not playing Hines. I'm not playing Taylor. I'm not playing the Colts backfield. If you have them, if you have multiple backs, for example, I suggest you do anything you can to get rid of them, or even just cut your losses entirely, because it's not going to change anytime
They
soon.
have great matchups coming up. Hopefully, we see some clarity this week.
Well, you
And
can't.
they give one guy a lot of carries.
You can't start one of them, earnestly without a couple of good games, at least one good game. And even if you do, there's no guarantee that they're not going to totally switch up with what they just did the previous game. I think you've got a hot hand situation here. And whenever you have a hot hand situation with more than 2 running backs, you just stay away from it. Learn from New England. Stop playing all those guys entirely. And I'm really sorry, MathQuest. I don't know that there's any good answer to your question, other than, unfortunately, you have Jonathan Taylor.
You hold and wait and see.
You got to find somebody else to start on your team.
Well, thank you for the question, MathQuest. I believe you've chimed in with some questions every week. We greatly appreciate that. And we will move on to Jerry Jeudy, the other Bronco of the evening. So he's a wide receiver, obviously, in Denver. Week 7, he put up only 3 points. Week 8 against the Chargers, 9.3. And then last week, week 9, 22 points in Atlanta. It's been great. His usage has exploded in the last 2 weeks. 24 targets over the last 2 games. That's more than the previous 4 games combined. And over those 2 weeks, he has the most targets on the team, which is where you want your wide receivers at, right? You need the guys who are going to be getting the ball the most, because that gives you the most chance to score points. So Jeudy is owned in 76% of flea flicker leagues. Check the waiver wire. Perhaps someone in your league is asleep at the wheel. Well, that would mean your entire league is asleep at the wheel, including yourself. So just take a look at it and see if he's there. It's always worth checking.
I did like watching the video of the play you're about to mention.
Yes. So he's been showing off his skills. This was a video that I saw on Reddit. I'll post my article of my trends, and I'll put a link to the video up on drinkfive.com. But basically, you see Jeudy running a route from like the 25 or so, just straight downfield, throws his arm up, wants the ball deep. But clearly, this is a play that him and Drew Lock have already talked about ahead of time, because he throws his arm up, making the defender bite on the deep, what would that be? Like a corner route, probably. And he just stops on a dime, catches the comeback pass, and runs it in for a touchdown. It was just a beautiful looking play. I really liked watching route running like that. So Jeudy is starting to show off that he has a good rapport with his quarterback. I really like to see that. What I really do want to see, though, is him bump up his completion percentage. He's only catching 49.2% of his passes, which is not what you want to see from a wide receiver. Even a guy who goes downfield, he's not going to be at a Michael Thomas kind of level, but he needs to be in the 55 to 60 range, not 49.2. It's like, when you're picking 49% of the fantasy players correctly, you feel like you're doing something, but you're not winning enough. You need to be 55%, 60% to be much more productive to get over that hump. So mostly positive matches coming up for him for the end of the year. He only has one top 5 defense that he has to play for the rest of the year. That's the Chiefs. He already played the Chiefs this year, so I think that the advantage would go to the rookie. I shouldn't say the advantage goes to the rookie, but he is going to be better equipped to play them than he was the first time around. So I want to know, Dave, with Tim Patrick is the only other sort of every down receiver, is it safe to call Jeudy the WR1 now on the Broncos? And to play him as such?
Well, you made a pretty good case for him, and I think the number 1 wide receiver there is still clearly Courtland Sutton. But Courtland Sutton is out for the season, and so because he's out for the season, Jerry Jeudy is the guy. Now, next year, I think the Broncos will have an even better time with both of those guys healthy and playing.
Yeah.
For right now, Jeudy is clearly the number 1, yeah.
And perhaps a different quarterback to mess with.
I doubt
next
it.
year.
They
You think they're going to stick with Drew Lock?
Yeah, they just recently bought him. Not bought him, but they just
Drafted
recently
him.
drafted him.
Yeah, so he was rookie last year, right?
Yeah, why would they have a different quarterback? He's doing really well.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not sold on Drew Lock.
What is your definition for when you need to have a new quarterback?
When they look like Sam Darnold?
The guy is doing really well.
He's doing better than... I mean, okay.
Honestly, Sam
We have
Darnold's
an
not a
Andy
bad
Dalton
quarterback
line.
either.
What's our rookie good to bad line?
Oh, I mean, I don't even know if that's a thing because most of those
There aren't enough of them to play.
most of those rookie quarterbacks are
They're either good or they don't get a chance to play, I suppose. We can call it the Mitchell Trubisky line, I suppose.
yes. But yeah, there's no way
If
that
you
they're
can be replaced by Nick Foles, then you're not a good quarterback.
there's no way Broncos are going to move on to a new quarterback. That's crazy.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, then let's hope that this rapport continues to develop and Jerry Jeudy can be doing well. If he continues his usage, 12 targets on average over the last couple games, is he worthy of an every week start? Would you start him over a Curtis Samuel?
Like I said before, when you have a trend that's going in a good direction, when you get a lot of targets per game, and when the quarterback is doing well, and all those things are true right now, then you have to consider Jerry Jeudy to be an every week start. And I know as well as you do that you have guys on your team where you're like, they have to play, because they're the studs and they have to play. But that philosophy is something that we struggled with when we were younger fantasy players. I don't use it anymore, and I think it's wrong and flawed. You have to play the players that are playing well, not the players that have names that you know because they've done well in the past. It's what have you done for me lately?
Sure. I certainly think that over the years, what we've come to realize is that as you get later in the season, you have to scrap the start your studs sort of mentality.
Well, yeah, because if they're not doing well for 3 games themselves, they're no longer a stud this year.
Right now.
And I think
you need to win this week and next week, and
Yeah, especially now, like we talked about the very name of the podcast today being playoff push. That just means that over the next couple weeks, you don't need to overthink things. Start the players that are doing well. It's very simple.
Yeah.
So Jeudy doing well, yes, put him in your lineup.
If you lose games because you put in all the players who are performing well at the time,
yeah,
I think you can live with that.
You got to ride the waves.
If
Jeudy is a
you lose because you keep throwing out Julio Jones, who's not going to be putting up enough numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know if Julio Jones is the right name to put in there. It's just, someone who popped into my head.
Well, if Jeudy on your team is putting up numbers to be your WR2, make him a WR2 and stop thinking about it.
Okay.
Terry McLaurin, wide receiver, Washington football team. Now he, believe it or not, is his ECR this week is WR6, the 6th wide receiver for week 10. He's a borderline WR1/2. He has been since he entered the league and kind of stunned everybody that first year by being scary Terry going down the field. Doesn't matter who your quarterback is. He's just making plays, making them big. Very quickly, and I won't go through all the stats. And again, like Jason said, we'll have these articles up for you to peruse later. You can look at all of the statistics over the previous weeks. But week 5 against the Rams, 4 points. Week 6 at the Giants Stadium, 10.9. Week 7 versus Dallas, 18.5. Week 9 versus the New York Giants, 21. And for all of those games, he had 7 targets, 12 targets, 11 targets, and 8 targets, respectively. The last 3 weeks, he has caught 7 passes each week and has scored more than 10 fantasy points each week, averaging somewhere around 16 fantasy points per week. So let me ask you, what can we say about
Scary Terry?
Right, he's great. What can we say about Washington?
Let me answer that really quick. They are a football team.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the Washington football team? What's the first thing you think about? The very first thing.
The very first thing I think about is all the bullshit surrounding their name. To be honest, with you.
Not
because they haven't been impressive enough on the field to take precedent.
Okay.
I think about Ron Rivera. I think about Alex Smith playing finally.
Yeah.
But when I want to focus on just a fantasy aspect, it's Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, and that's all I think about.
I think that's valid.
And I love watching McLaurin play. I mean, he gets behind the defense 4 or 5 times a game, and it's just a matter of getting him a good enough quarterback to get him the ball.
It is one of those situations where we look at a guy and say, we didn't necessarily expect you to play this well, but now that you are clearly a WR1 of a high standard, if you were on a team that had someone that was in the top quarter of quarterbacks in the league, you would be a top 5 receiver every single week. As it is, he's a top 10 receiver almost every single week. And I'll get to a little bit about that later. Even though we had guys like Dwayne Haskins and Kyle Allen and now Alex Smith throwing him the ball, just a bunch of nobodies as they'll go, as they are now. Anyway, Alex Smith definitely was a little better in previous years. Again, we're happy he's playing football, but
I'm great. I'm very happy that he's healthy enough to play.
But I wish I had a different quarterback, bombing the ball. Like if Joe Flacco was over there, who'd get the ball every single time.
He'd be drawing so many DPIs.
So you mentioned Antonio Gibson, and with the possible exception of Gibson, who's had some very nice performances, in weeks 4 and 7, for example, he scored 20.8 and 18.8 fantasy points, respectively, in those weeks. Terry has been the only consistent fantasy performer on an every-week basis for Washington.
Yeah, only 2 games below the double-digit mark. That's great. There is not a ton of, none of the positions are very top-heavy this year, where you've got, 5 to 10 just absolutely dominant guys. So, at tight end, you've got 1 to 2. At running back, you've got 3 or 4. At wide receiver, there's 4 guys and then a gigantic group of players in that second and third tier, and Terry McLaurin is one of them.
Yeah, if you go back to last week and listen to the podcast or watch the YouTube stream, we go over the top 10 list of the running backs and wide receivers as they were through week 8 as far as their points and compare them to their ADP. That's an interesting thing to watch. And if you are watching for the first time, for example, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel or hit subscribe to Spotify or Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us. We appreciate it. But going back to Terry, he has not been targeted less than 7 times a game this whole season. And that's exactly what you want in a receiver who's going to play for your team.
Volume.
I don't care who the quarterback is, as long as the offensive coordinator is going to call plays for McLaurin 10,
that's amazing.
10, 15 times a game.
I drafted him in a league this year. I'm happy to just look at my lineup and say, oh, McLaurin, that one's taken care of.
Yeah, so Terry McLaurin is WR11 on the year in half PPR. That's overall with 112.5 total fantasy points, averaging 14.1 fantasy points per game. So, Jason, do you think he's better to have on your team than the number 12, 13, or 14 receivers? And those guys are, in order, Thielen, Robbie Anderson, and Amari Cooper.
I'm glad you brought this up. I was just going to mention that he was number 11 overall. He is in a very tight group there. Those guys all are within just a couple of points of him. I would rather have Terry McLaurin, though. Not just because he scored an extra 0.5 points over Adam Thielen, but because he's on a team that is going to be down a lot, so he's going to be seeing a lot more passes.
It's those passes.
Yeah, and McLaurin may be the most talented of those wide receivers. So I'm a big fan of McLaurin. And he is clustered in there in that maybe third tier of wide receiver. You've got Tyreek and DK and Devontae sort of dominating that first tier.
Yeah.
And then you got a good second tier, but really that third tier is a ton of guys within 10 points of each other.
Yeah, agreed. Let me finish up. So looking forward to the matchups in the future, and we've got the Lions, the Bengals, the Cowboys, and the Steelers. This is for the Washington football team, for those of you just tuning in now. The games against Detroit and Cincinnati might prove challenging based on their points that they allow to the position, but the Cowboys and Steelers are giving up a lot of points to wide receivers, and Terry has already proven, like we said earlier several times, it doesn't matter who his quarterback is, only that there is a quarterback that he can throw the ball and he passes to Terry. And on that team, that's going to be any quarterback that he gets. It doesn't matter. So as long as McLaurin is healthy, he is a start as a wide receiver 1, in my opinion, going forward. It's good to see Smith still involving him heavily. Obviously, Alex Smith is a decent quarterback. He's a smart guy. So it's nice to see him involving him, because you know that a guy like Alex Smith could maybe make decisions that he likes a certain guy more than another one. He has a little bit more gravitas in the league than a guy like Kyle Allen or Dwayne Haskins does, for example.
Right. He's definitely more respected. He's gonna, and I have more faith in Alex Smith than Kyle Allen.
Well, he's not a very good
I don't
quarterback
know about
so far,
his
but...
physical prowess, but he's just coming back from being out of the league for 2 years. Let's give him a week or two.
Well, it's Washington. They can have the whole season.
You got a good point.
MathQuest has another
Yes.
question, so I'm going to answer it real quickly and give your opinion too. But just based on my rankings, the question is, in a deeper league, I'm inclined to sit Marquise Brown. And I believe I have him on the cut list too. We talked about him several times throughout the season. Marquise Brown and Lamar Jackson don't quite look the same as they have. Teams have figured them out in certain ways. They're not world beaters. So I don't have a problem with sitting him. He hasn't been doing very well. Would you guys start Tim Patrick or Curtis Samuel over Marquise Brown? The answer from me to you is in half PPR, which is our baseline. I have Marquise Brown at 37. I have Curtis Samuel at 33 and Tim Patrick at 40. And I'm very comfortable starting Curtis Samuel versus Tampa Bay. I think that Samuel is going to be put into those opportunities that we talked about earlier to have success as a guy who is probably maybe the fourth target on that offense.
Yeah, we sang the praises of Curtis Samuel to start the show.
Mm-hmm.
I like Curtis Samuel in this question here. In that group of guys, I would definitely start Curtis Samuel over those two. The one thing you know about Samuel is he's going to be getting the ball a bunch of times. He's going to have a chance to score a touchdown in pretty much every game. It's just up to him to actually make it happen.
That's true. He might strike out, but he probably has a stronger home run chance than a lot of those guys do. And that's even including Marquise Brown, who literally is like the home run hitter guy.
That's what he's known as.
He just hasn't been. They haven't been enjoying success over there. They're just running the ball on the Ravens. So hopefully that answers your question. That's half PPR, but you can check out my rankings to see standard or PPR. In general, I will start Curtis Samuel regardless of the scoring system over those two guys.
Yep.
So
I just cracked open another beer here from the Saugatuck Brewing Company.
Let me sample some of that.
Here's to Happy. That's a great little slogan you got there, guys. It is the Cottonmouth Crusher Raspberry Sour Ale, named after the Michigan cottonmouth snake.
Have you ever been to Saugatuck?
I don't know.
So Saugatuck is a really awesome town in Michigan that's right on the water, cool downtown. It's a kind of a party town. Everybody likes to hang out and drink beers, and it's fantastic. So
I believe I've driven past Saugatuck on a number of occasions. Probably on the way up to Grand Rapids, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, Saugatuck is where I went to one of the best disc golf courses I've ever been to. Yeah, it's right on the lake, on Lake Michigan. You take like you play around at a beautiful course. You take like a mile hike. You go to the dunes on the lake. It looks like a fucking ocean. It's amazing. I've never seen, lived in Chicago my whole life, see Lake Michigan all the time. I've never seen Lake Michigan from that angle with no buildings around, just completely natural. It's a completely different experience. It's amazing.
You have to hang out on the west coast of Michigan on the Lake Michigan border right there.
Yeah.
Because all those towns, Grand Haven, South Haven, all the way down to Michigan City, Indiana, are fantastic. And we don't know really how cool those beaches can actually be over here on the Illinois side, because it's mostly urban and industrial, and it messes it up.
It's a lot of that. Yeah, this is just, it was amazing. I can't recall the name of the disc golf course, but if you are a disc golfer, then you need to just go to the course in Saugatuck sometime in your life. It's totally worth the trip. Anyways, back to fantasy football, if we can.
Sure, yes.
I want to bring up Mr. Ronald Jones of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's their one of their two running backs. So in Week 7 against Las Vegas, he put up 10.10. Week 8 against the Giants, 4.6. And last week against the Saints, only 3.3. So after Week 6, Rojo was riding high. He was the first running back of the season to have 3 straight 100-yard games. He was seeing heavy usage in the passing game, but it all came crashing down in the last 3 weeks. He has 23 total carries over the last 3 games. That is not befitting an RB1 with 92% ownership in leagues. I feel like there is plenty of people who have started him all 3 weeks.
Well, I'm sure the ownership percentage was like 99 or 100%, and it's fallen to 92.
It has fallen to 92. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So he's only combined for 66 rushing yards during those last 3 games. That's a 2.8 yards per carry average. Absolute garbage. He can basically fall forward and almost make that much. So you need to do better than that, Mr. Jones. So during this time, what we've seen is that Leonard Fournette has 27 carries. That's more than Jones. Not a lot more. It's a split at best going forward. The larger portion of the split, call it a 60-40 maybe, is going to Leonard Fournette. So Jones, when he was playing well, was the only back going on. Now we've got Fournette being slightly more effective, like 5% more effective at best. But I have to say Jones may not be a lost cause because it's going to be hard to predict who Bruce Arians wants to play every week. I don't really understand what his. I feel like some coaches I can read, some coaches I can't. You look at Mike Tomlin, you know who's going to be the running back week to week. You look at Bill Belichick, you have no fucking clue. I feel like Bruce Arians is slightly more on the Bill Belichick side, where I don't really know who he's going to want to go with on a weekly basis. So if they're both healthy, it's almost like a coin flip as to who is going to be better that week. But if either of them gets hurt, the other one is going to have a dominant role. It's like rivalry week every week. So the matchups this week and in week 16 are against teams giving up top 5 fantasy points to running backs. So I don't think that you get rid of Jones. I think it's another hold situation. You possibly pick your spots carefully, start him against good matchups, hope that the game flow is in your favor, see how it's going. But this week is one of those good matchups, so it's going to be tough to hold off starting him, even though perhaps maybe it is the right call. I dove into this and I could not come up with a proper recommendation for Ronald Jones. I have to say. So, do you think that he's a chance to rebound as an every week starter, or is this going to be a split situation for the rest of the year?
So I like to turn to snap counts when we talk about this, and if we look at the snap count in 2020, we have Ronald Jones, who had the biggest portion of those snaps between weeks 3 and 6. That's 51% of those snaps in week 3, then 64%, 69%, 57%, and then since then it's actually trended down 57, 43, and 43, 24, and 32%. So it's 31 snaps in week 7, 17 in week 8, 16 in week 9. Whereas Leonard Fournette, after he started getting back in the rotation in week 7, was already out-snapping Jones and continued to do so over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, Fournette 56, 73, 66 last
So
week.
there's now a trend of Fournette substantially out-snapping Jones every week for the last 3 weeks. So you know me, how I like trends. I would say stomp on Rojo as far as starting him continually. If you're going to start anyone on that team, you should start Fournette because you should always start the running back that plays more than the other ones.
Great call on the snap percentage. That is a wonderful stat to look at. I always turn to profootballreference.com, pro-football-reference.com, in order to look up stuff like that, really to confirm any of the stats that I want to find. But the snap percentage is listed right there, game by game, how many snaps they're in, what percentage of the total offensive snaps those players played.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the metrics that people don't use or don't use well or enough? And that would probably be targets, points per touch, which is an amalgamate of stats, and then the snap count for any player. But Rojo can do damage and has, but we know in the past that he's had opportunities as well that have never really resulted in any kind of year-long consistency.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that again, is that, yes, he may have done well over the course of the year, but it looks like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going more and more towards the veteran players on their team. In this case, that's going to mean Leonard Fournette over Ronald Jones.
And they did trade for Fournette. It's obvious that they're going to want to use him.
Yeah.
Now that he's been around, he's healthy again. Yeah, it looks like he's going to be the primary back, but not the main back.
The real question is ask Tom Brady, because whatever Tom Brady wants, Tom Brady gets.
That's a good point. So can we assume that the Bucs offense is going to be okay, or is Tom Brady finally fallen off the cliff?
I think that Tom Brady will be fine, and everybody has these kinds of falls. I really actually enjoyed watching the Saints kind of pick apart Tampa Bay. And you have to also understand that the New Orleans Saints defense has been really good lately and should continue to be really good. So it's not only the fact that the Drew Brees and Taysom Hill were able to score points kind of effortlessly against the Tampa Bay defense, but the New Orleans Saints defense was clicking. And I think a lot of that might have to do with the fact that they have Jameis Winston and they know all the plays. I mean,
he got to eat the dub at the end of the game.
It's not like Arians completely changed the offense since Winston left. I mean, I guarantee you that some of that, like there was interceptions, there was so many interceptions. I mean, he had to have told them exactly where things were going to be.
He's like, "Hey guys, I got the inside track on interceptions from the Bucs."
He knows more about interceptions in Tampa Bay.
I threw 30 of them last year. Wasn't he 30 and 30 last year?
It was like 5,000 yards, 6,000 yards, and
30 and 30,
8,000 interceptions.
Why is Jameis Winston not a starter?
The last guy that we
have, he was fun.
Well, he got his eyes fixed, so maybe next year we'll see. The last guy on our list is Jonnu Smith, tight end, Tennessee.
He could be a wide receiver.
I mean, he certainly could be. ECR right now is a tight end of 13, which is a borderline between tight end 1 and 2. That's where I've seen him over the past couple weeks. He used to be a tight end 1 no problem based on his usage in that offense. Right now with the targets and things, which I'll talk about in a moment, he has fallen a little bit off of that. So the question is, will he continue to go on this path of like a lower amount of targets, or will it trend another way? And let's get into that. So looking at the past 3 games, Week 7 versus Pittsburgh, he had 4 targets, only caught one of those passes, 0 touchdowns. Bad fantasy performance, 1.4 fantasy points. So bad by anybody's count, by anybody's rules. Week 8 at Cincinnati, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 29 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3.9 fantasy points. Not good. Week 9 versus Chicago, still 2 for 2, 32 yards, 1 touchdown, 10.2 fantasy points. Now, we know a couple things about Jonnu. Jonnu has had good success in the past with the Titans, regardless of whether his quarterback was Ryan Tannehill or Mariota. It doesn't really matter. He's kind of broken out over the past 2 years. And he's still the tight end number 5 overall this season with 78.4 fantasy points. Earlier this season, he's done really well. So that keeps his average up to 9.8 fantasy points per game. And in a world, Jason, where the point difference between the tight end 1, Travis Kelce, and tight end 10, Dalton Schultz, is 74.1, which is more points than the number 8 tight end has, Robert Tonyan, you have to keep what success you can find close to the chest at that position.
I got a number for you. So shameless self-promotion, but it's for us, so it's not so self or shameless.
Go for it.
Every Monday, I write a column called Statistically Insignificant, and I like to delve into fun stats just like the one you just pointed out. So I pointed out in the column that Travis Kelce, with his 139.9 points on the season, has 50 more points than the tight end 2, which is just an absurd difference between number 1 and number 2. It's like Travis Kelce is tiers 1, 2, and 3, and then there's the rest of the guys.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of how it was looked at the draft as well with him and Kittle. Unfortunately, Kittle's had injuries and the 49ers suck. But
yes,
that
is very unfortunate.
It was definitely sort of predicted beforehand that would be the case. So those of you smart enough to draft Kelce, which you have to do in the first 2 rounds, or you don't get him usually.
Yeah.
You ended up getting someone who is not only one of the best tight ends, also the best wide receivers, filling a slot where no one else scores any points.
Yeah.
So
or the points that are scored are so utterly random that you couldn't possibly have them on your team. One of the things I bring up on an almost weekly basis is that, 6 or 7 of the top tight ends are never owned in our leagues.
Yeah, so it's difficult, and it has been for a long time when we talk about tight ends, and there is some method to the madness. There are players that we have bet on that have done well, but you're right. Halfway through the season, a lot of times teams sort of switch gears and they change their offense, and you don't know how that's going to affect tight ends because a lot of times they'll be forced to switch to blocking roles, and that's sort of what's happening here with Jonnu Smith. He's a better blocker than anybody else on that team in the tight end position, and so you have Anthony Firkser, who has taken
Firkser.
Okay.
It's just such an awkward name. I like to say it.
I think it's Firkser.
Let's,
But yeah, check it out.
It's F-I-R.
I think it's K-S-E-R.
I thought it was S-K-E-R.
Well, we will find out. Either way, we have all the right letters. Just
F-I-R-K-S-E-R.
yeah, it's Firkser.
Firkser.
Well, we had the right letters. You just don't know what order they're in, right?
You know, just a little dyslexic.
But what I'm saying is that you have Firkser, who is acting more as a move tight end in general, and that's only because Jonnu has taken up more of the blocking because it's been needed for that particular offensive line, for Derrick Henry, for some of their wide receiver plays. And when I talk about well, I'll get to this in a second. But I want to ask you, what random tight ends have you started and then just dropped immediately after when they were horrible?
Oh, man.
Just give me a couple.
I feel like I tried out Mr. Firkser. All right. You know, rule of thumb, if you can't pronounce his name after 3 tries,
just call him Anthony.
Just don't even bother.
His name is not Robert.
Okay.
You're talking about somebody else.
I'm talking about Robert Tanyan or something. I don't know.
But you had him for a week, and then found out that he would only get 2 targets for 20 yards, and summarily dumped him.
Here's what has worked for me this year is picking up Gronk.
Whenever someone drops him, you pick him up?
I just pick up Gronk, and I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm starting Gronk again.
Well, Gronkowski was a funny use case for Tom Brady because when he first started back into the NFL, he wasn't doing anything, wasn't getting any targets,
there's nothing.
Was
yeah,
looking lost out there. But now he's done better. I think we can throw out the tape on last week and burn it, assuming that they're able to do fairly well in Week 10. But Gronkowski has ended up being a good tight end over the past 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So Smith returns, in my opinion, to must-start territory after finally having a plus day in Week 9. But it should be noted that the Colts are only giving up the second fewest points in the league to the tight end position, and they play the Colts next. So that's scary stuff for someone who's only getting 2 to 3 targets per game. And this is the kind of dance that you have to do, the dance macabre, when you were talking about picking a tight end who's between the ranks of 5 and 12.
If you're doing the dance macabre, you better have a French tight end.
Wait, do we have any French tight ends?
I don't think so.
We got to get some.
We've got a German tight end,
we've got
Dalton Schultz.
Dallas Goedert.
There we go.
Yeah, but he should actually be pretty good coming back now with Zach Ertz, who knows where. So the Titans have A.J. Brown healthy, Corey Davis actually doing things, and the other tight end, Anthony Firkser, who we mentioned earlier, sucking up some of those targets, getting about the same kind of production as Jonnu Smith. So that means 2 to 3 targets per game. Now, if Jonnu Smith was able to get all those targets, we would probably see him remaining in that top 5.
Yeah.
But I think because this is all happening, and bully for Tennessee to having a bunch of healthy receivers, because not everybody does, but because they
don't,
because they do have all these guys right now, it does drop Jonnu to probably let's say tight end 10 to 15, which is touchdown dependent tight ends who get 2 targets per game.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate, but that's almost all the tight ends, let's be honest. It's just pick one of these guys from this big pool. Jonnu Smith is not a bad pick, but he's not a great pick.
That's what Jimmy Graham is doing every week. That's what even T.J. Hawkinson is doing every week.
Hawkinson's actually been
well, he's the number 3 tight end, which is amazing. But at the same time, it's just the last 3 weeks that he's played well and had a bunch of targets. Before that, it's all still kind of low.
So the question becomes, what are your options if you think that you shouldn't gamble with Smith on a team with not enough targets to go around for that particular position, which is what this situation is. So would you go with someone else even though Smith just had a 10-plus fantasy point performance? Would you try to find somebody else? And if you couldn't find anyone that was markedly better, would you just continue with Smith?
This week, I'm going against Smith. They play Indianapolis, who are giving up the fewest points to opposing tight ends.
I just talked about it. Second fewest.
Okay.
Close.
The fantasy points against numbers vary everywhere. The one I just looked at said first. I'm sure when I go to the Yahoo page, which is what I normally consult, it'll say something different.
That's fine.
Point being, Indy is very stingy when it comes to giving up points to opposing tight ends. I would go somewhere else. As far as free agents right now, you got Mike Gesicki, Logan Thomas, and Darren Fells.
See, I don't think that any of them are markedly better, so I would stay with Smith.
So unless you have been holding on to a second guy, yeah, I guess you got to just roll with Smith.
But
and
that's my point.
Just trust the fact that Indy hasn't seen anyone the likes of Jonnu Smith this year.
It's one of those things where
except for the game when they played already, right?
Except when they saw him.
Except for they haven't. They played this week and then again in 2 weeks.
Yes. They play the Colts, then the Colts.
The Colts and then the former Baltimore team, then the Baltimore team, then the former Baltimore team.
Well, my whole point really was that he's most likely not going to give you a lot of fantasy points unless he saves his day with a touchdown. That's true of a lot of tight ends. The next few matchups, like Jason mentioned, he has to deal with the Ravens, the Colts, and the Browns. All those are in the top half of the league as far as preventing fantasy points from that position. So I think you hold on to Smith for the fantasy playoffs. I have no problem with playing somebody else or even dropping him. But you should know that if you drop Jonnu Smith, you may never find anyone that good again.
You should not drop Jonnu Smith. I don't mean to imply that.
Because he's had bad games, but he's still a top tier tight end in 2020 tight ends. And it's a dangerous game we're playing here with tight ends on a week to week basis. So, do you have Travis Kelce on your team? No. Well, then good luck to you, sir.
Yeah. So, we have a question about a trade in the chat room. Is this a good trade? Will Fuller, Josh Jacobs, and James Conner. Already, I don't like it because it's too many players involved in a trade.
Too many? You can't have that many
I
players?
don't like a 3-for-3. I don't think that it's easy to match value there. For Henry, I assume Derek, Juju, Smith-Schuster, and Kareem Hunt.
It could be Hunter Henry, too.
Then it's a bad trade for the guy in the second half who gets the Hunter Henry side.
Well, we need more information. Baller HQ, if you could give us, is it a PPR league? Is it a dynasty league? Is it a redraft league? Was it a keeper league? What's going on?
I think I would much rather be the person who is going to wind up with Fuller, Jacobs, and Connor.
And I would agree with that. So in most cases, especially if it's a redraft league, kind of regardless if it's PPR or not, I would love to have Fuller, Jacobs, and Connor because I think they're all going to do well down the stretch.
Fuller has a touchdown in 6 straight games.
He's always done that. As long as he's healthy, Fuller destroys all fantasy points.
Yeah. And Juju is a very it's a
Henry.
Redraft league. It is, of course.
Okay, so really the trade, I guess, is for Derrick Henry because Nick Chubb coming back limits Kareem Hunt's value, or maybe allows it to remain the same.
I think it helps.
Juju Smith-Schuster is a touchdown-dependent receiver that's not the best on his team, or possibly the second best any longer.
Correct.
And so I don't have a lot of value for him. And Josh Jacobs and James Conner. So let's look at it as this:
are just going to get so much work every week.
Let's call the trade. Let's look at Josh Jacobs and James Conner for Derrick Henry, for example. And I think the answer there is
the 2-for-1
is
not enough.
Is that it's not enough?
You're giving up too much to acquire Derrick Henry.
Right. And so if we look at that and say there's too much value in Jacobs and Conner for Henry, then we also add in Will Fuller, and all we're getting back is Juju and Kareem Hunt, then I think the answer is the person with Fuller, Jacobs, and Conner will win this every single time.
I agree. I think that person should either
pull the trigger
happy with what they get or don't make the trade.
If you're getting that, baller, then I would say do it absolutely. But I don't see a whole lot of value going forward in Juju and Hunt just because if you were giving up Josh Jacobs and James Conner and Will Fuller, then you might be making your team worse.
Yeah, obviously Fuller, Jacobs, and Conner are all starting every single week on your team.
They should be. I mean,
yeah.
2 top 10 running backs.
Juju, you're not going to want to start every week.
Where is Fuller in the top 10 wide receivers? Is he like a 15 or something at this point?
Well, he's certainly in the top 20.
Do I have the... Yeah, here they are. Wide receivers, half-point PPR. Will Fuller is number 10.
There he is.
So, yeah, you can't trade those
just above
guys.
our guy, Scary Terry.
When we look at the running backs, we've got James Conner at 12, Josh Jacobs at 9. So, number 9, number 12 in running back, number 10 in wide receiver. Trading him for Kareem Hunt, who's number 8, Derrick Henry, who's number 3, and Juju Smith-Schuster is like the throw-in because Juju is the number 24. So, I guess what you're doing, it depends on whether or not you're
kind of shuffling the deck.
Like, do you have another running back on your team that is like secretly the number 11 running back or something? You can just slot them both in there. I don't know. That's rough. I would honestly stick with Fuller, Jacobs, and Connor and not trade those guys. I think Jason agrees.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our cut list. So let's go over this fairly quickly. I'm just going to provide a sentence of what I think after we talk about the guy.
Here's one thing to say in favor of Derrick Henry. He has a bad schedule right now, but his weeks 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all amazing matchups.
Yeah, but is this guy, whoever's selling Henry, selling him like low? He's selling Henry low. Like, that's insanity.
He has Joe Mixon, who is not currently playing.
Gio might start this week unless there's more news.
You can't rely on Mr. Mixon.
So it sounds like you are the guy who has Fuller, Jacobs, and Connor.
Usually when people bring up trades, their side of the trade is mentioned first. Look, it's tempting to trade for Derrick Henry. I don't think that you're getting enough for what you're giving up.
And I think Nick Chubb's gonna go out there and be a stud. I don't think it's gonna make.
Try to give up Joe Mixon instead of James Conner.
No one's gonna trade for Joe Mixon, who's injured right now and not practicing.
Then I don't think that you should make this trade.
You can't trade Mixon for Connor.
Okay.
Yeah. I sorry. We think that your trade is dead in the water, man. I mean, you could make it, but I think the other guy will probably become the victor of the trade. I think Connor had a bad game. He's going to bounce back in a big way. Josh Jacobs should be good on that excellent offense somehow they put together in Las Vegas. And Will Fuller is going to continue to have a touchdown every single game.
Yep.
Do you want any whiskey, or shall I?
I'm good on the whiskey. I'm going to have just another sip of beer here.
All right. Cheers to you guys. Thanks for the question, Baller. We have just about 10 minutes or so left in the show, so we're going to talk about
finish that off.
The cut list. And so for the cut list, these are guys that on a 10 or 12 team league, in my opinion, you should not own. You might have owned, but you should not own after today, because there is no point in you having them on your team. They're only making your team worse and not better. And what do we want? We want teams that are better.
We want to be better. That's a pretty simple equation.
So let's talk about quarterbacks. Teddy Bridgewater is the guy on my list here, facing a Bucs defense this week that's awfully good against quarterbacks not named Drew Brees or Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
He should get back to his old tricks without CMC. Old tricks like averaging just 14.5 fantasy points per game, like he has done from weeks 6, 7, and 8. So we talked about Bridgewater doing really well down the stretch. It just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. It would be great if he had Christian McCaffrey, because then he could just toss the ball 2 yards and get a touchdown every couple plays. But unfortunately, we don't know what's going to go on with Christian McCaffrey. At least maybe there's been an update since earlier this afternoon. But
the only update I see on
day-to-day or week-to-week
is that he's not expected to play, according to Adam Schefter.
Yeah. Now, I would love if he comes back in a couple of weeks, and that's great. Maybe it'll change my opinion on Bridgewater. But unless you're in a Superflex league, there's no point in owning Teddy Bridgewater for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Running backs, JaMychal Hasty. We talked about him a while back. I know you gave me a bunch of flack about this guy. You thought he was going to be the next guy to go grab.
It's just because that team is so great at running the ball, but there's too much missing on that team now. I withdraw my JaMychal Hasty.
Well, I did a whole thing about it. I mean, this is a UDFA guy that's a scat back that didn't really have strong reviews except from the team before the season started. And who believes what the team before the season starts says? Right. Nobody. No, right. Actually, I should say everybody believes it. Nobody should. McKinnon and his tired legs, in quotes, are a better bet for fantasy points than this overrated and reached for player. With Mostert probably coming back this week or next week.
Next week. I think he's already been ruled out for this week.
There is no point whatsoever in owning Hasty. Get rid of him. Dump him. We get some sound effects up here like Le'Veon Bell. Might be a surprise, but if you look at his stats, it's not. Unless you're in a deep league, the Chiefs are not utilizing the running backs how any fantasy team manager would prefer. Bell has netted 10 points total in half PPR in the 3 matchups he's had as a Chief. So thinking that he is going to do really well sometime soon, how long can we think that? Well, I'm not going to think about it anymore. So I'm going to keep the guy for possible, next year or two in leagues that are dynasty. I am not going to keep him on any of my redraft leagues. What is the point of having a guy who's for the last 3 games scored 4 points? No point. Wide receivers,
No
Marquise Brown. We talked about him a little earlier. I compare him to a late career Mike Wallace. You didn't keep him on the roster either.
The Mike Wallace of the Dolphins?
Yeah.
No.
So here's a Marquise Brown who so occasionally gets a long touchdown that you would never have started him. And then once you start him because of his long touchdown, he won't do well for 3 games.
The Baltimore offense is just, they're not good this year.
We talked about it. We caught on to that early in the season this year. And, I think it personally has to do a lot about what's on tape, seeing these guys. How does he move when talking about Lamar Jackson? Michael Vick was an unstoppable force until people figured out what their tricks were over there.
Yeah.
That and he got injured every year, so that's the thing. Anyway, Marquise Brown is a dump. Henry Ruggs, we talked about him earlier. Why don't you talk about Ruggs and why we should cut him?
Well, Ruggs hasn't done anything in the last 3 weeks. I think he has probably 7 total fantasy points. So, if that isn't enough to cut him, then you want to look at the fact that at the wide receiver position on the Raiders, they are not throwing the ball to anybody other than maybe Nelson Aguilar, maybe Hunter Renfrow. Henry Ruggs is like the 5th option right now on that passing offense. He's not rosterable. It's a shame. I wanted him to be the guy this year. He was, the fastest wide receiver in the draft?
Yeah, but again, they're rookies. Yeah. Like, we can't expect
Not happening
them.
this year.
We can't expect them to do well, and yet everyone does every year.
Let's see a full, normal preseason training camp, all of that, with the team. Maybe Henry Ruggs can make something of himself. This is not the year.
Well, most rookies take 2 or 3 years anyway to break out. So I
Correct.
think Ruggs has shown he had 1 game in week 5 with 18.8 fantasy points that he can get those touchdowns, grab them, and run. But
there was only 2 receptions in that game. Still,
yeah, it's those long big plays.
He averaged 59 yards per reception in that game.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
Do you want to close us out here?
So I believe your next guy is Laviska Shenault, if you remember. Yes. So Shenault was a little banged up. I think he came back last week, but with the new guy Jake Luton there, it seems like he is going to be focusing on DJ Chark because Chark is clearly the better receiver on that team.
Yeah, Chark and Robinson, and it doesn't seem like, at least for right now, there's a lot of room for other people. In the
That's
offense.
one of the biggest problems you have on these weak offenses is that there just isn't room for enough players. And if Shenault has 1 more good game on the rest of the year, do you want to waste a roster spot where you're not going to start him anyways? Just to see the 1 good game.
Nope.
At tight end, we're going to drop Zach Ertz. Shouldn't he have been out of there already?
Well, a lot of people are holding on to Ertz because he's one of the top tight ends, and the tight end's a wasteland.
That's true. But he's not going to play this year, is he?
Oh, absolutely. He'll come back, yes.
Okay.
He's not out of the picture. He just had a high ankle sprain.
Oh, that takes so long to recover from.
Well,
I had written him off for the year at this point.
No, it was 4 to 6 weeks, and it was a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
But it's not like he broke his collarbone or something.
Okay.
But that said, I don't think that he's very valid because by the time he comes back and you let him have time to get back into the offense, the season's over.
Right. And you don't want to start a guy in week 13 who's just returning on the off chance that he's going to sneak into the end zone.
Yeah.
That's not how you get into the playoffs.
Yep.
And this week is all about making the playoffs.
Now, last week you had Mike Gesicki on the tight end. 2 weeks ago on the tight end cut list, and Jason and I have traded off on this sometimes. And I tried to fight it. I wanted Gesicki to do well. He's a really good athlete. He was really great in college, but it's not translating into real world production. And he does get a couple passes a game, much like a lot of the tight ends we talked about today.
Sure.
So he might get that 20, 30, even 40 yards. But if you're not getting touchdowns, if you're not getting involved in the red zone, and if Tua, who's the quarterback for the Dolphins now, is not focusing on you as a primary component of the offense, then you're just one more guy in that deep pool of tight end candidates that probably is somewhere between the 14 and 18 tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, his stats over the last 3 games look like Henry Ruggs.
So not enough opportunities. Again, move on. It's the same like with Teddy Bridgewater. It's the same with a lot of these guys. But what some people really fail to do, and this is why we do the cut list, is they fail to let go of those guys. They keep them on their team, and then because they're keeping them on their team, they're not grabbing those players that have a real opportunity to do well, those players that could spark something to get you into the playoffs. Do you really want to end up with 2 or 3 players on your team, on your bench that you never start? Week after week, hope that they do better, and just watch your team fade into the 7th place team.
Every week, you need to ask your bench, "What have you done for me lately?"
That's right. What have you done to make this world a better place?
Yes.
Well, that's it from my end, Jason. So if we wrap up, want to tell them a little bit about drinkfive.com and how they can subscribe.
Please go to drinkfive.com. You can check out the rookie report every week by our rookie expert, Sean Foss. You can check out the confidence picks from Tad. You can subscribe to our YouTube page. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. We're easy to find. We're at Drink5 pretty much everywhere. And make sure you subscribe to us, like I said, on YouTube. We are live on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Central. So if you're listening to us later on, you can join us live, check out the video, ask us questions in the chat room, and be a participant in the show. And we appreciate all the participants. Thank you, Dave.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers, buddy. Drink 5.
Will do.